She said it loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Nathan Cole." The woman laughed, not the kind that was warm, the kind that cut. "Honey, I'd rather die alone than spend one day tied to a man like that." Nathan was 10 feet away. He heard every word. He kept walking. He did not stop. He did not turn around. He pressed his hand against his leg, the leg that had saved 3 men's lives and cost him everything else. And he walked to his horse, and he rode home. And he sat in an empty kitchen, in an empty ranch, and he made a decision. He would stop hoping. He was wrong to make it. If this story is already speaking to you, subscribe right now. Hit the bell and follow Nathan and Evelyn all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Red Willow, Montana had the particular quality of a town that had decided certain things were permanent. The mountains were permanent. The cold was permanent. The opinion of the people who had lived there long enough to believe their observations were facts, that was permanent too. And the most permanent opinion in Red Willow, the one that had survived 7 years of repetition and become so embedded in the town's daily conversation that people said it without thinking the way you say good morning or looks like rain, was this: Nathan Cole would die alone, not because he was a bad man. The people of Red Willow were not most of them bad people either. They were frontier people, which meant they were practical, which meant they had learned to sort things quickly into categories of useful and not useful possible, and not possible worth the effort and not worth the effort. And Nathan Cole, 39 years old, living alone on the Ridgeback Ranch, 6 miles north of town, walking with the particular careful gait of a man whose left leg had been rebuilt by a doctor, who had done his best and come up somewhat short. Nathan Cole had been sorted. Not worth the effort, not for a woman anyway, not for a life. He had been sorted 7 years ago, the day he came out of the Harlan mine collapse, and nothing he had done in the 7 years since had managed to unsort him. The mine collapse happened on a Tuesday in October, which Nathan remembered not because of the date, but because of what he'd been doing the morning before it. He had been fixing a section of fence on the north pasture, and he had been thinking about a woman named Catherine Marsh, who had smiled at him at the harvest dance 3 nights prior, and he had been in the specific way of a 32-year-old man who has been alone long enough to find it uncomfortable, quietly hopeful. By Tuesday evening, the hope was beside the point. There were 3 men trapped in the Harlan mine's 3rd tunnel. Young men, 2 of them barely 20. The third, a father of 4 who had come west from Missouri with the particular determined optimism of a man who believes that hard work in a new place will produce what hard work in the old place didn't. Nathan had been riding past when the collapse happened. He had heard the sound, a low subterranean groan that the earth made when it was rearranging itself, and he had understood immediately what it was, and he had gone in. He got all 3 of them out. He also got 12 tons of mountain on his left leg in the process, and the getting out took 4 hours, and what came out of that mine was not exactly the same man who had gone in. The doctor in Red Willow, a good man named Aldridge, who had studied in Boston and come west because he believed in doing the most good in the places that needed it most, set the leg as well as it could be set, given what had happened to it. He told Nathan honestly that it would heal, that he would walk, that the pain would become manageable over time. He did not tell Nathan that manageable was not the same as gone, because he trusted Nathan to understand that. Nathan understood it. He managed it. He went back to the Ridgeback Ranch, and he kept working because the ranch didn't care about his leg, and the horses didn't care, and the fence line didn't care, and work was the thing that had always made the most sense to him anyway. What he could not manage was the way people looked at him, or stopped looking at him. Catherine Marsh married a man from Billings in the spring. He was perfectly fine by all accounts. He walked without a limp. Nathan did not blame her. He did not blame anyone specifically, which was perhaps the problem. The thing he felt was too diffuse to be anger, too deep to be mere disappointment, too constant to be called grief. It was simply the understanding accumulated slowly over 7 years that the world had reorganized itself around him and had placed him in a particular position that was not chosen and was not easily left. He stopped going to town gatherings by the 3rd year. Not dramatically, No announcement, no scene. He simply stopped going, and nobody came to ask why, and after a while, nobody noticed which was its own answer. By the 7th year, his world was the ranch, the horses, the mountains, and the routine of a man who has made his peace with what his life looks like by deciding not to look at it directly. He was replacing a board on the barn wall on a Wednesday morning in September, when his nearest neighbor, a man named Roy Teague, who ran cattle on the adjacent property and had the comfortable, slightly overbearing manner of someone who believes their helpfulness is universally welcome, rode up and said, "Got something for you." It was a letter. Nathan took it. He looked at the handwriting neat, careful, the writing of someone who had been taught properly, and took it seriously. He looked at the return address, Butte, Montana. "Came through the post office yesterday," Roy said with the expression of a man who wants to stay and find out what's in the letter. "Aldridge said it came in response to your notice." Nathan had placed a notice in 3 papers in September: the Red Willow Courier, the Butte Examiner, and the Helena Herald. He had written it the way he wrote everything, directly, without unnecessary decoration. Seeking housekeeper and household companion for isolated ranch property near Red Willow, Montana. Work includes cooking, cleaning, supply management, and general household organization. Room and board provided plus $12 monthly. Respond to Nathan Cole, Ridgeback Ranch, Red Willow. He had received 7 responses. 6 of them he had rejected without a great deal of deliberation, for various practical reasons. This was the 7th. "Thanks, Roy," he said, and went back to the barn board. Roy waited a moment. "Aren't you going to—" "I'll read it later," Nathan said. Roy left with the particular sigh of a man who has been denied information he felt entitled to. Nathan read the letter that evening at the kitchen table with his coffee. It was 4 paragraphs. The first introduced the writer Evelyn Parker, 32, widow of 14 months, currently residing in Butte, with a cousin who was kind, but whose house was full. The second described her qualifications. She had run a household for 8 years, managed accounts for a dry goods business, could cook for any number of people, and had experience with livestock from her childhood on a farm in Wisconsin. The third was the one that made him set down his coffee and read more carefully. "I want to be honest with you, Mr. Cole, because I think you have been honest in your notice. I am not looking for romance or rescue. I am looking for useful work in a place where my contribution is real and needed. I am a capable woman in a difficult situation, and I believe you may be a capable man in a similar situation. If that is the case, I think we could help each other very practically." The 4th paragraph was simply her contact information and the statement that she could arrive within 2 weeks of confirmation. He read it twice. Then he wrote back. She arrived on a Friday, which he had not expected. He had told her Friday was possible, and had half assumed she would need a week to arrange things, but she arrived on the first possible Friday, which told him something. The stage from Butte came through Red Willow at 2 in the afternoon. He was at the depot at 1:50 because he had been raised to be on time, and because he was under the managed stillness of a man who had learned not to expect things more nervous than he'd been in several years. She stepped off the stage with 1 large bag and 1 small one, and she looked around the depot with the focused, assessing look of someone cataloging a new environment. Not anxious, not performing confidence, just actually looking, actually taking it in. He walked toward her. She saw him coming and did not look at his leg, and did not look away from his leg. She looked at his face, which was where people's eyes usually went before they remembered the leg, and redirected, but she kept them there. "Mr. Cole," she said. Her hand came out. A real handshake. "Mrs. Parker," he said. He took her bag, the large one, automatically, and she let him take it, without the slight hesitation he had learned to expect from people who were recalculating how much they should ask of a man who walked the way he walked. "Thank you for the confirmation letter," she said. "I appreciated the directness." "Your letter was direct," he said. It seemed appropriate to respond in kind. She looked at him. A brief, specific look. "I thought you might not write back," she said. After the part about capable people in similar situations, I worried it was too presumptuous. "It wasn't," he said. "Good," she said. They walked to the wagon. He had been aware in the day before her arrival that Red Willow would notice. The town noticed everything, and a woman arriving to work at Nathan Cole's ranch was the kind of thing that would be discussed thoroughly and without much accuracy. He had decided he didn't care because he had been practicing not caring about Red Willow's opinions for 7 years and had gotten reasonably good at it. What he had not anticipated was the specific quality of the attention. Not the ordinary sideways glances of a town observing a newcomer, but the particular loaded attention of a community that has an existing story about one of the people involved and is watching to see how the new information fits. He heard it as they crossed the main street. Not directed at him, or not only at him, at her. That's the woman answering his notice. Mrs. Flannery, 62, who ran the seamstress shop and had opinions about everything in a radius of approximately 3 miles. Poor thing doesn't know what she's gotten herself into. Her companion, younger, who Nathan didn't know well. Or she knows and has no other options. Mrs. Flannery again, with the comfortable certainty of a woman who has diagnosed a situation from a distance and sees no need to revise. He did not look at Evelyn to see if she had heard. He kept walking. She said beside him without lowering her voice, "That kind of talking tends to get louder before it gets quieter." He looked at her then. "In my experience," she said, "you wait it out. Eventually they find something more interesting." "And if they don't," he said. "Then you make yourself too busy to notice," she said. "Which you seem to already be doing." He looked at her for a moment. "You heard them. I have ears," she said. "I also have the ability to decide what matters and what doesn't." She glanced at him. "Is that going to be a problem? My ability to make that decision for myself?" "No," he said. "Good," she said again. He put her bags in the wagon and helped her up. She accepted the hand, without making it a moment, which was the right way to handle it, and they drove out of Red Willow toward the Ridgeback Ranch while the town watched and had opinions, and Evelyn Parker looked at the road ahead with the expression of a woman who has made a decision and is done second-guessing it. The ranch was not what she had expected. He could tell not from alarm or disappointment, but from the slight recalibration of her expression when they came through the gate, the adjustment of someone who had formed a mental image and is now updating it. He had spent 2 days before her arrival doing the things he always did, and also cleaning the main house more thoroughly than he usually did, which he acknowledged to himself without embarrassment, because it was a practical response to a new person arriving. She walked through the main house without comment, which he appreciated. Some of the women, who had come to look at the position he had had 3 in person before her, had made comments in the first 10 minutes, either appraising things or finding fault. And he had understood from this that they were people who processed their environments by narrating them, which was fine as a quality but not useful to him. Evelyn was quiet through the main house. She looked at the kitchen with the focused attention of a woman inventorying what was there and what wasn't. She opened 2 cabinet doors. She picked up the supply ledger from the table he had left it out because he thought she would want to see it, and she leafed through 3 pages. Then she set it down and looked at him. "The accounts are 2 months behind," she said. "I know," he said. "I've been meaning to. I'll have them current by end of week," she said. "Not a criticism, a statement of plan." "What's the supply run schedule?" "First and third Thursday of the month," he said. "Tom Henley at the general store." "Does Tom know the ranch requirements, or does someone give him a list?" "I give him a list," he said. "Good," she said. "I'll take over the list." She looked at the kitchen again. "I'll need to understand your preferences. Food schedule what you want managed and what you want left alone. It'll take me a week to understand the rhythm of the place, and after that, I'll be more useful." He looked at her. "Most people take longer than a week." "I learn fast," she said. "Show me the rest of the property." He showed her the property. All of it. The barn, the paddock, the equipment shed, the supply, building the chicken coop that had been running at half efficiency for 3 months because he hadn't had time to repair the eastern wall. She asked specific questions about each. Not social questions, not how long have you had the horses, or do you like it out here, but operational questions. How many head of livestock? what the supply deficit was in winter versus summer, whether the equipment maintenance was on a schedule or as needed. By the time they completed the circuit of the property, he had answered approximately 20 questions and asked none, because she had not given him space to ask them, and he had found that he did not particularly mind this, which was unexpected. At the equipment shed, she stopped. There was a piece of fence equipment leaning against the wall, a post driver that had a cracked handle he had been meaning to replace for 6 weeks and hadn't. She looked at it. "That handle," she said. "I know," he said. "It's on the list." "What list?" "The mental list," he said. She looked at him. "Is most of your maintenance on the mental list?" "Some of it," he said. "Then one of the first things I'll do," she said, "is make it a physical list. Things stay on mental lists longer than they should." She paused. "No offense." "None taken," he said, because there wasn't. She was right. They went back to the main house. He made coffee because it was mid-afternoon, and coffee was what mid-afternoon required on the Ridgeback Ranch. She sat at the kitchen table and began reading the supply ledger properly, not leafing this time, but reading with the focused attention of someone who was going to retain what they found. He set a cup in front of her. She looked up. "Thank you." "You're welcome." She looked at the cup, then at him. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask," he said. "7 responses to your notice," she said. "I'm guessing not all of them were right. How many came out here?" He sat down. 3. "And?" "The first one lasted 4 days," he said. "She found it too isolated. The second one lasted 2 weeks. She found it too—" He paused. "She had a different idea of what the position involved. And the third—" He was quiet for a moment. "She was a good woman," he said. "She was trying to find something specific, and this wasn't it." Evelyn looked at him steadily. "You're telling me they left because of the isolation and the work?" "Yes," he said. "You're not telling me they left because of the other thing," she said. He met her eyes. He was very still. "People talk," she said. "I heard things in Butte before I came, and I heard things at the depot today." She looked at him. "I want you to know that I read your notice carefully, and I came because of what you wrote, not because I had no choice. I have a cousin in Butte who would let me stay indefinitely. It would be uncomfortable, but it would be an option." She paused. "I came here because the notice was honest, and because I am tired of situations that are not what they present themselves to be." He said nothing for the moment. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. "Because," she said, "I think someone should have told you before now that the position you're in is not a pity position, and I think whoever is coming to work here should be doing it because the work is real, not because they have nowhere else to be." She looked back at the ledger. "I have somewhere else to be. I'm here because this is better." She paused. "That's all I wanted to say." The kitchen was quiet. He picked up his coffee. He drank it. He set it down. "The first Thursday supply run is in 9 days," he said. "I'll show you the route before then." "Good," she said, and went back to the ledger. The first week passed in the particular way of a new arrangement, finding its rhythm with the occasional stumble, the minor adjustment, the slow mapping of how two people's habits occupied the same space. She was up before him every morning, which he discovered on the second day when he came to the kitchen at 5:30 and found the coffee already made and a note on the table that said, "Checking the chicken coop back by 6." He read the note. He poured his coffee. He thought about the fact that in 7 years of living alone on the Ridgeback Ranch, no one had left him a note on the kitchen table, and he was surprised by the particular quality of the feeling this produced, which was something between discomfort and gratitude. She fixed the chicken coop's eastern wall on the 3rd day. He hadn't asked her to. It was on the maintenance list she had physically written out and posted on the wall of the equipment shed, and she had simply looked at the list and determined the chicken coop was the most pressing item and done it. He came to the coop at mid-morning to find her on her knees with a hammer replacing the bottom board, with the focused, unhurried manner of someone who knew what they were doing and didn't need an audience. Where did you learn to do that? He said. Wisconsin, she said. Farm. I told you in the letter. You mentioned livestock, he said. I didn't think you meant. My father taught me everything he knew, she said. He said a woman who couldn't fix what broke was a woman at the mercy of whoever came to fix it. She pulled a nail from her pocket. He wasn't wrong. He watched her set the nail and drive it in one clean motion. Your husband, he said. He had not planned to ask. What did he do? She was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of not wanting to answer, the silence of deciding how to answer honestly. He was a good man, she said. He ran a dry goods business in Butte. We were married 8 years. She set another nail. He got sick in the spring. It went faster than we expected, faster than he should have gone. He was 41. She drove the nail. The business had debt I didn't know about. When it was settled, there was almost nothing. She sat back and looked at the board. I sold what I could, paid what I could, and moved in with my cousin Margaret. She paused. Margaret is very kind. Her house has 4 children in it, and approximately 1 room where I am not in the way. I'm sorry, he said. About your husband. Thank you, she said. She stood and looked at the coop. The top boards will need replacing in spring. I'll put it on the list. She walked back to the main house. He stood by the chicken coop and thought about what she'd said. My father taught me everything he knew. The practical delivery of it. The absence of self-pity which he recognized because he had worked hard to have the same absence in himself, and he knew how much work it took. Bye. The moment that changed things happened on the 8th day. He was in the barn at dusk doing the final evening check on the horses. He had 3 all-working animals, all with the specific personalities of horses that have been well treated for years and know it when he heard the wagon on the road. Not his wagon. Someone else's. He came out of the barn. It was Roy Teague. Roy climbed down from his wagon with the slightly formal posture of a man who has decided something is his business and has arrived to conduct it. Evening, Nathan, Roy said. Roy, Nathan said. Roy looked at the main house. A light in the window. Evelyn was making supper. I wanted to come by, Roy said with the tone of a man opening a conversation he has rehearsed. Check in. See how things were going with the arrangement. Things are going well, Nathan said. Good. Roy looked at the house again. She seems capable enough. I saw her at the store in town yesterday placing the supply order. Tom Henley said she knew what she was doing. She does, Nathan said. Roy cleared his throat. People are talking, Nathan. People always talk, Nathan said. I mean specifically about... Roy stopped. Started again. The concern is that a young woman alone out here with a man who is... He stopped again. Nathan looked at him steadily. With a man who is what Roy... Roy's jaw worked. People are concerned about her situation, he said. That she might not have understood what she was coming into. That she might feel obligated to stay. You could ask her, Nathan said. She's inside. I'm asking you, Roy said. She came of her own choice, Nathan said. She stays of her own choice. The work is fair and she does it well. He looked at Roy. If you have a concern about the propriety of the arrangement, there's nothing improper about it. If you have a concern about her welfare, she is entirely capable of representing her own welfare. He paused. Is there anything else? Roy looked at him. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not agreement. Something more complicated. The expression of a man who has come to deliver a certain kind of concern and has found it landing differently than expected. No, Roy said. I suppose not. He climbed back into his wagon. He rode out. Nathan stood in the yard and breathed. He heard the door behind him. He turned. Evelyn was on the porch. I heard most of that, she said. I know, he said. You handled it well, she said. He looked at her. Did you need me to? She thought about it honestly. No, she said, but I appreciated it. He walked to the porch. He stopped at the bottom step and looked up at her. She was one step above him, which put them at the same height, which was not something he had planned, but which had the particular quality of things that are accidentally right. Roy means well, he said. He has a picture of what my situation is. He's had it for 7 years. It's hard to revise a picture you've been looking at that long. She looked at him. What is the picture? He said nothing for a moment. That I need managing, he said. That I need looking after. That whatever I have isn't quite enough for a full life. He said it without bitterness, which was the hardest part, saying the true thing without performing the feeling about it. They mean it kindly, most of them. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you think? He met her eyes. I think, he said carefully, that for 7 years I have been believing a version of that picture. And I am not entirely sure yet what I believe instead. She nodded, slowly. That's honest, she said. You said you were tired of things that weren't what they presented themselves to be, he said. So was I. She looked at him, and she said, Supper's ready. Come in. He went in. They ate supper at the kitchen table, that had been a table for one for 7 years, and the kitchen was warm, and the food was good, and neither of them said anything particularly significant. And it was, Nathan thought, the most ordinary meal he'd had in longer than he could measure. Ordinary was not the word he had ever associated with his life. He was beginning to think he had underestimated it. On the 9th day, she put something on the kitchen table that he had not expected. A ledger, new purchased in town on the supply run. On the first page in her precise handwriting, Ridgeback Ranch Accounts and Operations, E. Parker Manager. He picked it up. He opened it. The first 6 pages were the supply accounts corrected and current. The next 2 were a livestock schedule he had been running from memory for years, now written out with the winter feed requirements calculated by month. The page after that was the maintenance list, the physical one she'd posted on the equipment sheet wall, now copied into the ledger with priority rankings and estimated completion dates. The last page she had filled in was titled, Revenue Opportunities Proposed. He read it. She had identified 3 things the ranch was currently positioned to do, but wasn't doing, selling excess hay to 2 neighboring properties that she had identified from conversations in town as consistently undersupplied. Offering horse training services, she had noted that his 3 horses were exceptionally well trained, which was a marketable fact. And a third item that made him stop. Harlan Mine Family's regular supply delivery at cost. Current situation families isolated irregular access to town. Ranch positioned as midpoint. Goodwill value significant. The Harlan Mine families. The families of the 3 men he had pulled out of that tunnel 7 years ago. They still lived on the North Ridge, still worked what remained of the mining claim, still made the difficult trip to Red Willow once a month for supplies. He set the ledger down. He stood in the kitchen with his hands on the table, and he looked at what she had written, and he felt something move through him that he didn't immediately have a word for. Something that was not gratitude exactly, though gratitude was part of it. Something that was more like the feeling of being seen by someone who had been paying attention. She came in from outside. She looked at him. She looked at the ledger. The Mine families, he said. It made sense, she said. You're between them and town. And I thought, she paused. I heard about the accident. In Butte before I came. Someone mentioned it. Not kindly, but... She stopped. I thought you might want the connection to still mean something. That's not... She stopped again. If that's presumptuous. It's not, he said. She looked at him. It's the least presumptuous thing anyone has said to me in 7 years, he said. The kitchen was very quiet. She nodded once. She went to the stove. He stood at the table with the ledger under his hands and the particular weight of an understood thing, and he thought this woman came from Butte with 2 bags and a letter, and she has been here 9 days, and she already knows more about what this ranch could be than I have allowed myself to think about in 7 years. He thought I have been very carefully not building anything. He thought I am not sure this evening if I want to keep not building. He looked at the page she had written. Goodwill value significant. He looked at her back at the stove. He thought, I do not know yet what this is, but it is something. And for a man who had spent 7 years carefully managing his expectations down to nothing, for a man who had decided that the shape of his life was fixed and small, and he was going to live in it until he didn't. That thought, arriving quietly in the warm kitchen of the Ridgeback Ranch on the 9th evening, was the most significant thing that had happened to him in a very long time. He picked up the ledger. He took it to his chair. He read every page. He read every page, and what he found in those pages was not just a ledger, but a map of what the Ridgeback Ranch could become if someone believed it was worth becoming something. And he sat with that map in his hands for a long time, after the lamp had burned low and the house had gone quiet. And he thought about the word significant, written in her precise handwriting. And he thought about what it meant that a woman who had known him for 9 days had seen a possibility in his life that he had stopped looking for himself. He put the ledger on the corner of the table where he would see it in the morning. He went to bed. He did not sleep for a while, which was not unusual for him. He had not been a reliable sleeper since the accident, since the particular kind of darkness that a mind creates when it closes around you. But the quality of the wakefulness was different tonight. Not the familiar management of pain and memory. Something more forward-looking. Something that kept returning to the page she had written, and the 3 words at the end of the last line. Goodwill value, significant. In the morning, she was already in the kitchen, as she always was, and the coffee was already made, as it always was, and there was a list on the table beside the ledger, not the maintenance list, a new one, short 4 items with the heading, Questions for Mr. Cole, written at the top. He sat down. He read the list. He looked at her. You have questions, he said. 4, she said. When you're ready. I'm ready, he said. She sat down across from him. The hay surplus. How much are we talking about realistically after the winter reserves are set? 12 to 15 tons depending on the season, he said. She wrote a number. The Granger property and the Teague property. Roy Teague's place. Are they the right buyers, or are there better options? Teague always runs short in February, he said. The Grangers are unpredictable. The Bellamy place on the South Ridge is more reliable. She crossed out a name, wrote another. The horse training. Is that something you'd want to do, or something you'd rather I not put on the list? He looked at her. Why would it matter whether I wanted to? Because, she said, it involves you working directly with other people's horses on their schedule. That's different from what you currently do, which is largely on your own schedule. She met his eyes. I don't put things on the plan that the people involved don't want to do. That's how plans fail. He considered this. I'm willing to try it, he said. 1 client to start. Good, she said and wrote it down. 4th question. The Mine families. I want to do the first delivery myself. I don't want to send you without warning. And I don't want to go without knowing if that's all right. He understood what she hadn't said. She was asking if it was all right to bring him back into contact with the people whose connection to him was built on the worst day of his life. She was asking carefully. It's all right, he said. I'll come. She looked at him for a moment. You don't have to. I know, he said. I'll come. She wrote it down. She closed the notebook. Thank you, she said. For what? For answering directly, she said. My husband used to say that the fastest way to waste time was to ask a question and then spend 20 minutes getting to the actual answer. She stood and picked up her coffee. I appreciated that he said it. I appreciate it more in the people who actually do it. She went to check on the chickens. He sat at the table with his coffee and thought about what she'd said, and thought about her husband who had died at 41, and who had apparently been the kind of man who said useful things, and he felt a complicated mixture of things that he elected not to examine too carefully on a Thursday morning before the supply run. He drank his coffee. He got to work. The supply run to Tom Henley's general store was the first time Evelyn went to Red Willow in an official capacity, not the quiet arrival of a newcomer, not the preliminary visit for the supply order, but the full public appearance of a woman who worked at Nathan Cole's ranch and was not hiding the fact. Red Willow noticed. He drove the wagon. She sat beside him with the supply list in her hand and the particular upright posture of a woman who has decided to meet a thing head-on and has arranged her body accordingly. He had offered to let her go alone. It would have been simpler in some ways, less of a statement, and she had said, "Why would I go alone? The order is for the ranch. You're part of the ranch." So he drove. And she sat beside him. And they went through the main street of Red Willow together, which was, he understood, not a small thing in the accounting of this town. Mrs. Flannery was on the boardwalk outside the seamstress shop. She watched them pass with the expression of a woman updating a story she thought she already knew. Two men outside the hardware store watched with the flat, frank stare of people who are not bothering to pretend they aren't watching. Roy Teague came out of the post office and stopped on the steps. He looked at Nathan. He looked at Evelyn. He tipped his hat to her. She nodded back. "Good morning, Roy," Nathan said. "Morning," Roy said. The word had a quality to it not unfriendly, but recalibrating the sound of a man revising something. Tom Henley at the general store was the most straightforward of all of them. He was 60, had run the store for 30 years, and had developed over those 30 years the specific wisdom of a man who supplies a whole community and has learned that his business depends on treating everyone the same way, which was honestly with respect and without unnecessary commentary on their personal lives. "Miss Parker," he said when they came in, "I got your last order. Everything's filled." "Thank you, Tom," she said. "I have additions for today." She handed him the list. He read it. "Hay baling wire, you're increasing the baling operation." "We're expanding the hay sale," she said. "The Bellamy place and 2 others." Tom looked at Nathan. Nathan said nothing. Tom looked back at the list. "Good thinking," he said, and went to fill the order. Nathan watched Tom go and thought in 7 years Tom Henley had never told him good thinking about anything related to the ranch. Not because Tom was unkind, he wasn't, but because Nathan had not been thinking expansively about the ranch for 7 years, and Tom had been responding to what was actually there. Evelyn had been here 10 days, and the man who supplied half the valley had just said good thinking. He was still processing this when the door opened behind him, and he heard a voice he recognized, younger than most in the store, with the specific carelessness of someone who has not yet learned that words cost things. "Well, I'll be. Nathan Cole in town on a Thursday." He turned. It was a young man named Dale Carver, 25, son of a rancher on the east side of the valley, with the easy confidence of someone whose body had never failed him, and who had therefore not had to develop any of the qualities that came from that particular education. "Dale," Nathan said. Dale's eyes went to Evelyn with the assessing look of a young man encountering an unfamiliar woman. "Who's this?" "Evelyn Parker," Evelyn said before Nathan could answer. She looked at Dale with the same direct attention she brought to everything. "I manage the Ridgeback Ranch, and you are—" Dale blinked. He had not expected to be asked. "Dale Carver." "Carver," she repeated. "East Valley. Your father's property runs along the Ridgeback's south fence line." She had been reading the ranch records, of course she had. "The fence on that boundary needs attention before winter. If your father wants to share the repair cost, it'll be cheaper for both operations. Tell him I said so." Dale stared at her. Nathan looked at the supply shelves and felt something move through him that was, he realized with some surprise, very close to amusement. "I'll tell him," Dale said. "Thank you," Evelyn said, and went back to reviewing Tom's order. Dale looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at Dale. Dale left. Tom Henley behind the counter was very carefully not smiling. They drove to the Harlan Mine families that afternoon. 3 families lived on the North Ridge in the cluster of small properties that had been established when the mine was operating and had stayed when the mine closed, because leaving requires resources that people who have just lost their primary income often don't have. Nathan knew all of them knew them as the people attached to the 3 men he had carried out of the tunnel, which was a specific and particular kind of knowing, the kind that existed because of a specific event, rather than ordinary accumulation. He had not been to see them in 18 months. Not because he didn't think about them. He thought about them often the way you think about the things that are attached to the worst moment of your life, which is constantly and sideways, never directly. He had stopped going because going made the mind real again in a way that staying away managed, which he understood was not a good reason, but was an honest one. Evelyn had said nothing about this when she wrote the item in the ledger. She had simply written it and asked carefully if it was all right. He was the one who had said yes. The first house was the Doyle place, James Doyle, who had been 23 when Nathan pulled him out, who was 30 now, with a wife and 2 young children, and the specific quality of a man who had been given back time he hadn't expected and was being careful with it. James came to the door before they reached it. He had heard the wagon on the ridge road, which carried sound well, and his face did the thing Nathan had been bracing for, which was the complicated expression of a man encountering the person who saved his life, and not knowing whether gratitude was still appropriate after 7 years of distance. "Nathan," he said. "James," Nathan said. He climbed down from the wagon. He did it the way he always did, managing the left leg, not looking to see if anyone was watching. "I brought supplies. We've got enough surplus at the ranch to bring up what you need at cost." Evelyn figured the routing. James looked at Evelyn, who was already at the wagon bed, looking at the supply boxes with the practical air of a woman checking that everything was accounted for. "Mrs. Parker," she said when James looked at her. "James Doyle," he said. He was quiet for a moment, then to Nathan. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," Nathan said. "We've been managing," James said. "I know that too," Nathan said. "This makes the managing easier." James looked at him for a long moment, the full, steady look of a man who has something large to say and is trying to find the version of it that is honest without being overwhelming. Then he said, "My boy is named Nathan, in case you didn't know." Nathan went still. He had not known. Or he had half heard something from Roy Teague 2 years ago and had filed it away and not taken it out. "He's 4, James said. "Stubborn as a post. Good kid." Nathan looked at the door of the house where a small boy was standing watching them with the intent focus of a 4-year-old encountering something new. He looked at James. "That's—" He stopped. He did not have the right words for what that was. He found this occasionally with important things. The words were there, but the path to them was longer than the moment allowed. "Thank you," he said. It was not enough. He said it anyway. James nodded. He understood. They unloaded the supplies. Evelyn organized it with Tom Henley's efficiency, which was also her own efficiency, the efficiency of a woman who had been organizing things her whole life and did it without needing to be seen doing it. She talked to James's wife, a woman named Ruth, who had the watchful, careful manner of someone who had learned that good things required paying attention. And she asked about their supply needs for winter, with the same direct, practical questions she asked about everything. By the time they left the Doyle place, she had a list of what all 3 families would need through February and had done the preliminary calculation of what the Ridgeback surplus could cover. They drove to the second house in silence. Not uncomfortable, the silence that follows a moment that needs room. After a while, she said, "He named his son after you." "Yes," Nathan said. "How does that feel?" she said. He thought about it honestly. "Like something I hadn't earned," he said. She looked at him. "You pulled him out of a mine." "I was there," he said. "I did what was there to do." "Nathan," she said. She said his name the way she said things that were important directly without preamble. "I've met 3 kinds of people in my life. People who do the right thing and want credit for it. People who don't do the right thing and make excuses. And people who do the right thing and immediately argue about whether it counts." She paused. "You're the 3rd kind, which is better than the first 2, but also profoundly frustrating." He looked at the road. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "My father used to say something like that." "Was your father a wise man?" "He was a practical man," Nathan said, which in his case was the same thing. She settled back against the wagon seat. "Mine too," she said. They drove to the second house. The second family was the Parkers' no relation to Evelyn, which she noted with the slight dry humor she deployed occasionally, and which he was beginning to recognize as one of her better qualities. Owen Parker, 34, with a back injury from the same collapse that had left him in permanent discomfort, but working anyway, because the alternative was not something he was willing to consider. Owen shook Nathan's hand at the door and held it a beat longer than a regular handshake, not saying anything with words, saying it with the grip. And Nathan held the handshake and said nothing, and it was enough. The third family was the Masons. Robert Mason, who had been the father of 4 when Nathan pulled him out, and was now the father of 6, which was the kind of thing that happened when a man was given back time he hadn't expected. Robert's wife Clara cried when she saw Nathan, which he managed with the particular patient dignity of a man who has learned that other people's feelings about what happened to you are not yours to manage, but are yours to witness. Evelyn stood slightly to one side and let it happen. He noticed this, that she understood without being told what required space and what required presence, and that she made the right call both times. On the drive back, when the ridge road leveled out and Red Willow was visible in the distance, she said, "That was a good afternoon." "Yes," he said. "You should have been doing it for years," she said. "I know," he said. "What stopped you?" He thought about the honest answer. He had several to choose from, all of them true, all of them partial. "The mine is still real when I see them," he said. "The rest of the time, I manage it. When I see them, it's—" He paused. "Present." She was quiet for a moment. "The rest of the time, what do you do with it?" "I work," he said. "That's what I did with Thomas," she said. "After he died, I worked. There's always more work than there is anything else, and work doesn't ask you how you're feeling." "No," he said. "It doesn't." "That's useful," she said. "For a while. And then it becomes the way you live, rather than the way you cope, and you don't notice the difference until someone makes you stop and look." He looked at her. "Is that what you're doing?" he said. "Making me stop and look." She held his eyes for a moment. "I'm managing a household and an accounts ledger," she said. "What you do with the looking is your business." He looked at the road. He was smiling. He did not make a production of this, but he was. It was on the 14th day that Red Willow made its first organized move. He was in the equipment shed when he heard the wagon. Not Roy this time, a different sound, heavier, more formal. He came out to find 2 wagons in the yard. From the first, Reverend Michaels, who ran the Red Willow Methodist Church with the sincere, slightly overwhelming conviction of a man who believed that God had opinions about most things and had chosen him to relay them. From the second, Dorothy Crane, who was 67 and had been the unofficial social arbiter of Red Willow for approximately 40 years, and whose presence anywhere was the community's way of saying that something official was happening. Evelyn came to the porch. Nathan stood in the yard between the wagons and the porch. "Nathan," Reverend Michaels said, climbing down. "Good afternoon." "Reverend, Dorothy." Nathan looked at them. "What can I do for you?" "We've come to speak with you," Dorothy said, "about the arrangement." "The arrangement is working well," Nathan said. "I'm sure it is," Dorothy said in the tone of a woman who is not sure at all. "However, there are concerns, in the community, about the propriety of a housekeeper working on a ranch," Nathan said. "Of an unmarried woman living alone with an unmarried man," Dorothy said. She looked at Evelyn on the porch. "No offense intended, dear." "None taken," Evelyn said. Her voice was entirely pleasant. "The community's concern," Reverend Michaels said, with the careful tone of a man who is trying to be both diplomatic and honest, "is that Mrs. Parker's reputation could suffer, that people might draw conclusions." "People are already drawing conclusions," Nathan said. "They were drawing them the day she arrived." "Which is exactly why we felt it necessary to come," Dorothy said. "Nathan, you're a good man. We don't want anyone to suffer because of an arrangement that could be resolved very simply." Nathan looked at her. "Resolved how?" Dorothy and the Reverend exchanged a look that had clearly been part of the discussion before they arrived. Mrs. Parker could board in town, Dorothy said, with Margaret Henley, Tom's wife, who has a spare room and would be glad to— No, Evelyn said. Both visitors looked at her. She had come down from the porch. She stood in the yard now, and her voice was still pleasant, but had the specific quality it got when she was saying something final. I appreciate the concern, she said. I do, but I'm going to be direct with you both because I think directness respects your time and mine. She looked at Dorothy. I am a 32-year-old widow who has made a legal employment arrangement with Mr. Cole and am performing that work competently. The arrangement is professional. My reputation, such as it is in a town I've lived in for 2 weeks, is my concern, and I am not worried about it. She looked at the Reverend. The community's discomfort with 2 unmarried people sharing a household is a social convention, not a moral fact. I respect the convention, but I am not bound by the fear of it. She paused. If there is a specific harm I am doing to a specific person, I'm glad to hear it. Otherwise, I think you've made a long trip for something that doesn't require it. Dorothy stared at her. Reverend Michael stared at her. Nathan looked at his boots briefly and then looked at the horizon because there was nothing else appropriate to look at. Well, Dorothy said after a moment, you are very direct. I find it saves time, Evelyn said. Dorothy looked at Nathan. Is she always like this? In my experience, Nathan said yes. Dorothy looked from one of them to the other. Something in her expression shifted the slight reluctant adjustment of a woman who has arrived to manage a situation and found it has already been managed. I see, she said. Then, with the particular dignity of someone withdrawing without retreating, we'll leave you to your afternoon. They climbed back into their wagons. They left. Evelyn stood in the yard and watched them go. Nathan stood beside her. That was, he said, the most complete handling of Dorothy Crane I have ever seen. She meant well, Evelyn said. She did, he said. She always does. It doesn't make her less overwhelming, Evelyn offered. I was going to say something more diplomatic, he said. You could have, she said, but overwhelming is the accurate word. She turned to go back inside. I'll finish the winter calculations tonight if you want to review them tomorrow. Evelyn, he said. She stopped, turned. He looked at her. He did not have the prepared words for what he wanted to say, which was often the case with important things, but he had gotten better over the years at saying imperfect, true things rather than waiting for perfect ones. Thank you, he said, for the Mine families, and for that. He gestured toward where the wagons had been. You didn't have to handle either of those things the way you did. She looked at him steadily. Yes, I did, she said. Because they were the right things to do, and I was the person standing there. She paused. You do the same thing. You just don't notice when you do it. She went inside. He stood in the yard in the afternoon and thought about what she'd said, and thought about the mine and James Doyle's son named Nathan, who was 4 years old and stubborn as a post, and he thought about a woman who had arrived 2 weeks ago with 2 bags and a letter, and had written goodwill value significant in a ledger, and meant it in more ways than one. He was not a man who moved fast toward things. He had learned in the specific school of the last 7 years to be careful about expectation, to manage what he allowed himself to want, because the gap between what he wanted and what was available to him had been for a long time too wide to look at directly. But he thought the gap is different now. He thought, I am not sure what to do with that yet. He went to feed the horses because the horses needed feeding, and because work was what you did, while the larger things sorted themselves out. He did the evening check with the same routine he had done for 7 years, and the horses were the same horses, and the routine was the same routine. But something in the quality of the evening was different. Something had shifted. He was not yet certain toward what, but he was for the first time in a very long time certain that it was shifting. The twist that broke everything open came on the 20th day, and it came from a direction Nathan had not anticipated. Not from the town, not from Dorothy Crane or Roy Teague, or any of the ordinary sources of Red Willow's interest in his life. It came from Evelyn herself. He found her at the kitchen table at midnight. He had gotten up for water. He did this sometimes. The interrupted sleep, the leg finding new ways to be uncomfortable in the small hours, and she was sitting at the table with the lamp low and the ledger closed and a letter in front of her, and she was not crying, but had clearly been somewhere close to it recently. He stopped in the doorway. She looked up. She was not embarrassed. She didn't do embarrassment in the way that people did when they'd been caught in a private moment. She just looked at him with the honest, slightly tired expression of someone who has been sitting with a hard thing and is now not sitting with it alone. "I'm sorry," she said. "Did I wake you?" "No," he said. "I was awake." He came to the kitchen. He looked at the letter without reading it. He had enough respect for privacy not to read what he hadn't been shown. "Do you want me to go back to bed?" She thought about it. "No," she said. "Sit down." He sat. She looked at the letter. "It's from my cousin Margaret," she said. "In Butte." He waited. "Thomas's brother," she said. "Arthur. He's filed a claim against Thomas's estate. He says I withheld assets when the debts were settled. He's found a lawyer." She looked up. "It's not true. I settled everything exactly as it was. But it doesn't matter if it's not true if someone is willing to spend money saying it is." He looked at her. "What does he want?" "The house in Butte," she said, "which was sold to pay the debts. So what he actually wants is the money from the sale which I used to pay the debts, which means what he actually wants is—" She stopped. "He wants to make it expensive enough that I settle rather than fight." "How expensive?" Nathan said. She looked at the letter. "Margaret says he's asked for $200, or he takes it to court. $200. He did the arithmetic immediately the way you did when a number was large enough to matter. $200 against a $12 a month wage was a long time." "Do you have a lawyer?" he said. "I know someone in Butte," she said. "A man Thomas used. But engaging him costs money, and I've just—" She stopped. She pressed her lips together. "I've just gotten here. I've just started to build something. And now—" "Evelyn," he said. She looked at him. "I'll advance you the money," he said, "against your wages, whatever the lawyer costs." She stared at him. "It's a practical arrangement," he said. "You're managing a ranch that is already generating more than it was a month ago. The value is there. The advance is—" "Nathan," she said. He stopped. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm choosing to." She looked at him for a long moment, the lamp between them, the letter on the table, the midnight kitchen of a ranch that was becoming something, and a woman who had come here to build something and was now finding that what she'd run from had followed her. "Why?" she said. He said, "Because someone should have done it sooner." He heard the words come out of his mouth and recognized with a slight internal start that he was saying the thing he had been shown, that this was the sentence Evelyn had said to him in effect every day for 20 days, not in words, but in actions. Someone should have done this sooner. Someone should have seen this sooner. Someone should have said this sooner. She recognized it too. He could see it in her face. "All right," she said. Her voice was quiet. "Write to the lawyer tomorrow," he said. "Give him whatever he needs." She nodded. She looked at the letter. She folded it carefully precisely along the original creases and set it on the corner of the table. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me," he said. "Go to sleep." She almost smiled. "You sound like someone's father." "I sound like someone who knows that problems look smaller after sleep than at midnight," he said. "Which is a thing I learned the hard way." She stood. She picked up the letter. She looked at him. "Nathan," she said. "Yes." "The thing you said about someone doing it sooner." She paused. "You've been saying that to me too. Every day. Just without words." She held his eyes. "I want you to know I've noticed." She went to her room. He sat at the kitchen table in the low lamplight and the midnight quiet of the Ridgeback Ranch, and he thought about what she'd said and what he'd said, and what it meant that two people who had each been through the specific education of losing something could recognize in each other the vocabulary of that education. He thought, I have been very careful not to want things. He thought I am finding it increasingly difficult to maintain that carefulness. He blew out the lamp. He sat in the dark for a moment, then he went back to bed. He slept better than he had in months. He slept better than he had in months. And when he woke at 5 in the morning to the familiar sounds of the ranch coming to life, the horses shifting in the barn, and the wind off the mountain, doing what Montana wind always did in October, which was remind you that it existed and had opinions. He lay still for a moment and noticed the difference in the quality of the wakefulness, not the usual managed emergence from a night of interrupted sleep. Something cleaner, something that felt, if he was honest about it, like a man who had set something down before he went to bed and had not picked it back up in the night. He got up. He made the coffee because she was not yet in the kitchen, which was unusual enough that he noticed it, but not alarming. She was entitled to sleep past 5 on the day after a midnight letter from Butte. He made the coffee, and he stood at the kitchen window, and he looked at the Ridgeback Ranch in the early October dark, and he thought about $200, and Arthur Parker, and a lawyer in Butte, and he thought about the letter he was going to help her write this morning. And he thought briefly, and with a clarity that surprised him, about how different the ranch felt with someone else in it. Not just managed differently, felt differently. Like a place that had remembered it was supposed to be a place for people rather than a retreat from them. She came in at 5:40 with her hair not fully pinned and the letter in her hand, and the expression of a woman who has been awake longer than she'd slept and has made a decision while lying there. I know what I want to say to the lawyer, she said. Can I use your desk? It's your desk as much as mine, he said. She looked at him. It isn't technically. Use it, he said, and handed her a cup of coffee. She sat at his desk in the corner of the main room, and she wrote for 40 minutes while he did the morning barn check, and when he came back, she had 3 pages of tight, precise writing, and the expression of a woman who has finished something difficult and is glad to have it done. She handed him the pages. I want you to read it, she said, before I send it. He read it. All 3 pages carefully. It was the most organized legal argument he had ever seen from a non-lawyer. Every fact in sequence, every date documented, every asset and settlement listed with the corresponding record. At the end, a paragraph that said in her direct and unembellished way, I am prepared to defend this in court if necessary. I am also prepared to agree that this matter is settled because it is settled, and because spending further time and money on a claim without merit serves no one except the person bringing it. I leave that choice to you. He set the pages down. This is very good, he said. It's accurate, she said. That's the most important thing. Send it today, he said. I'll write it to the post office. She looked at him. You don't have to. I'm going to town anyway, he said. This was not strictly true. He had not been planning to go to town, but it became true the moment he said it, because the letter needed to go today, and he was the one with a horse and a reason to ride. She looked at him for a moment with the expression he had come to recognize as her version of gratitude, not the performed kind, the real kind, which in her case was brief and direct, and immediately followed by moving on. Thank you, she said. I'll be back by noon, he said. The hay delivery to the Bellamy place is this afternoon. I know, she said. I'll have it ready. He rode to town. He posted the letter. He came back. She had the hay ready. They delivered it together, which was the first time they had done a delivery to the Bellamy place, and Frank Bellamy, 55, taciturn, the kind of man who expressed approval by not expressing disapproval, looked at the delivered hay and looked at Nathan and said, Good price. Good customer, Nathan said. Frank looked at Evelyn. You the one who set this up. I identified the opportunity, she said. Mr. Cole made the decision. Frank looked between them with the assessing squint of a man who has spent 55 years reading situations. He said, which was Frank Bellamy's version of a lengthy statement. On the drive back, Evelyn said, What does M mean from Frank Bellamy? It means he approves, Nathan said. Of the hay arrangement. Of. He paused. Of the situation. Generally. She looked at him. What situation generally? He kept his eyes on the road. The ranch, he said. How it's running. A pause. That's not what he meant, she said. No, he admitted. It isn't. She looked at the road. He could feel her deciding something. Nathan, she said. Yes. I want to say something, and I want you to let me say it without you doing the thing where you argue about whether it counts. He recognized the callback to what she'd said about the mine. He said, All right, I came here for work, she said. That's still true, and the work is real and it matters to me. She paused. But something else is also true, and I think we're both doing the thing where we don't say the true thing because the true thing is complicated. She looked at him. I don't want to do that. I've spent enough time in complicated silence. He looked at the road. The situation is complicated, he said, carefully. You work for me. You've been here 3 weeks. You have a legal problem in Butte that I have resources tied up in. That's a lot of it's complicated. Yes, she said. I know all of that. She paused. I'm not asking you to resolve the complications. I'm asking you to stop pretending they're the only thing happening. He was quiet for a long time. The ranch came into view ahead, the gate, the barn, the main house with the lamp she had left burning in the window when they left. They're not the only thing happening, he said, quietly, like a man admitting something he's been managing around for a while. She nodded, once. Good, she said. That's all I needed to know. They pulled through the gate. Neither of them said anything else. But something had been said, something real and specific and deliberate, and the quality of the quiet on the ranch that evening was different from every quiet that had come before. The response from Butte came faster than either of them expected 12 days, which told Nathan something about Arthur Parker's lawyer, namely that he was the kind of lawyer who moved fast when he thought speed would produce fear. The letter was not from the lawyer. It was from Arthur Parker himself, which was a different and considerably less reassuring thing. Evelyn read it at this kitchen table on a Tuesday morning. He watched her face as she read it, not prying, not pushing, but present the way she was present when he needed it, the way he was learning to be present when she did. She set the letter down. He's coming here, she said, to Red Willow, to the ranch. She looked at the letter. He says he wants to discuss this personally. He says a lawyer's letter doesn't convey the full situation. She paused. He's coming Thursday. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Do you want him to come? No, she said, but I can't stop him from traveling. You can stop him from coming to the ranch, he said. I can stop him from coming to the ranch. She looked at him. That's not the right move, she said. If he comes and we refuse him entry, he tells his lawyer that I have something to hide. I need to meet him. I need him to see... She paused. I need him to see that I'm not alone. Nathan looked at her steadily. You're not alone. I know, she said. I need him to see it. He nodded once. Thursday, then. She folded the letter. She put it in the corner of the table with the other letter with Margaret's letter. He had been watching the corner of her table fill up the way he'd once watched his own fill with receipts and maintenance records and things he was meaning to deal with. She had a different corner. He had been noticing this the way she organized her world slightly differently than he did, but toward the same ends, the same underlying belief that things should be dealt with rather than left to accumulate into disaster. Tell me about Arthur Parker, he said. She looked at the corner. Thomas's younger brother, 41. He was never close to Thomas, different in every way that matters. Thomas built things. Arthur has spent his life looking for the short route to what other people built. She paused. He was pleasant enough at the wedding. He was pleasant enough at the funeral. I did not understand until Margaret's letter that the pleasantness was waiting to see what was worth taking. And he thinks there's something worth taking, Nathan said. He thinks I'm alone and without resources and will be frightened enough to pay $200 to make him go away, she said. He's used to being right about that kind of thing. She looked at Nathan. He's not right this time. No, Nathan said. He's not. Thursday came with the particular clarity of October days in Montana, when the cold was fully established, and the sky was the specific hard blue of a season that had settled in and meant business. Arthur Parker arrived at 10 o'clock in a hired wagon from Red Willow, which meant he had come by stage from Butte, and then hired transportation, which meant he had spent money on this trip, which told Nathan something about how convinced he was that the money would come back with interest. He was shorter than Nathan had expected. Compact, well-dressed, in the way of a man who spent money on appearance, because appearance was his primary tool, with the smooth, practiced pleasantness that Evelyn had described, and that Nathan recognized immediately as the pleasantness of a man who had learned to use courtesy as a form of pressure. Nathan was at the gate when the wagon arrived. He had chosen this deliberately, not in the barn, not on the porch at the gate, which meant Arthur Parker had to address him before he could address anything else. Arthur looked at him. His eyes went to the leg. Not obviously, he was too practiced for obvious, but Nathan had had 7 years of reading the specific way people's eyes moved when they were looking at the leg and recalibrating, and he read it now. "Mr. Cole," Arthur said with the warmth of a man who has decided to be warm. "Arthur Parker, thank you for allowing me to visit." "This is a ranch," Nathan said. "The work doesn't stop for visits. Come to the house." He turned and walked. He did not wait for Arthur to climb down and follow. He trusted Arthur to follow, because that was what people did, and because giving Arthur the option to be kept waiting at the gate was not useful to anyone. Evelyn was in the main room. She had not dressed up. She was in her working clothes because she had been working, because the work did not stop on Thursday any more than it stopped on any other day. She was at the desk with the ledger, and she looked up when they came in with the expression of a woman who has decided how this meeting is going to go and has arranged herself accordingly. "Arthur," she said. Not warmly, not coldly, precisely. "Evelyn." He looked around the room with the assessing gaze of a man pricing things. Nathan watched him do it and felt the particular quiet anger of someone watching a known move being made. "Sit down," Evelyn said. She closed the ledger. She set it on the desk. Arthur sat. Nathan stood near the window, not threateningly, not performing just there, present the way she had asked him to be. "I'll be direct," Arthur said. He had clearly decided that directness was the move, that Evelyn's reputation for it meant he should mirror it. "I believe there are assets from Thomas's estate that were not properly accounted for. I'm not saying you did this deliberately. I'm saying that in a difficult time things can be overlooked." "Nothing was overlooked," Evelyn said. "Evelyn, I have the settlement records," she said. "All of them. Every asset listed, every debt cleared, every transaction documented with date and signature." She reached into the ledger and removed a folded packet of papers. Nathan had not known they were there. She had not told him she'd put them there, which meant she had anticipated this moment and prepared for it without making a production of the preparation. "I sent copies to my lawyer in Butte. I have copies here. You are welcome to read them." She set them on the table between them. Arthur looked at the papers. He had not expected them to be in the room. Nathan could see the recalculation happening, the practiced pleasantness holding steady on the surface, while something harder shifted underneath. "I'm not questioning your record-keeping," Arthur said. "I'm questioning the valuation. Thomas's business had goodwill value that wasn't goodwill value. Evelyn said, requires a going concern. The business closed when Thomas died. There was no going concern. There was no goodwill." She looked at him. "Arthur, I know what you're doing. You're looking for a number that sounds reasonable enough that I'll pay it to make you leave. I understand the strategy." She paused. "I'm not going to pay it. I'm going to give you these records, and you're going to take them back to your lawyer, and your lawyer is going to tell you what my lawyer has already told you, which is that there is no case here." Arthur was quiet for a moment. He looked at the papers. He looked at Nathan. "And you're involved in this situation, how, Mr. Cole?" he said. "I'm the man who lives here," Nathan said, "and who is listening to this conversation." Arthur looked at him with the assessing look he had given the room pricing measuring. "I see," he said. "I don't think you do," Nathan said. "But the papers are what they are." Arthur picked up the packet. He looked through the first 2 pages with the careful air of a man trying to find something and not finding it. Nathan watched his face and watched the specific expression of someone who has built a case on the assumption that the records don't exist, confronting the fact that the records exist. He set the papers down. "I'll consult with my lawyer," he said. "Please do," Evelyn said. He stood. He looked at her. Something moved across his face that was not pleasant, the underneath of the pleasantness, the thing it had been covering. "Thomas would have been disappointed," he said, "in how quickly you've moved on." Nathan moved away from the window. He moved toward Arthur, not fast, not dramatically, but with the deliberate purpose of a man who has decided that there is one more thing that needs to happen in this room, and it needs to happen now. He stopped between Arthur and Evelyn. "Thomas Parker," he said, "by every account I have heard, was a man who built things and valued the people who helped him build them. His wife spent 8 years doing exactly that." He looked at Arthur directly. "I did not know Thomas. But I know the kind of man who makes a comment like the one you just made, and I know the kind of man Thomas apparently was, and they are not the same kind." He paused. "Take the papers. Leave the rest." Arthur looked at him. He looked at the leg. The quick, involuntary look that Nathan had been reading for 7 years. And Nathan looked back at him, and did not move, and did not adjust, and did not do anything except hold eye contact with the calm, specific certainty of a man who has stopped apologizing for what he is and where he stands. Arthur picked up his hat. He left. They heard his hired wagon leave the yard. Evelyn sat at the table with her hands flat on the ledger and breathed one long breath in and out, the controlled release of someone who has been holding something tight for a while. Nathan turned from the window. "He's not finished," she said. "No," Nathan said. "But he's less certain than when he arrived." She looked up at him. You didn't have to say that." "The part about Thomas, all of it," she said. "The whole—" She stopped. "You put yourself between me and him." "Yes," he said. "Why?" He looked at her. He thought about the honest answer, which was not complicated, but was significant. "Because I was there," he said, "and it was the thing to do." She held his eyes. "That's what you said about the mine," she said. "I was there. I did what was there to do." "Yes," he said. "Nathan," she said. "Because I was there," he said, "and it was the thing to do." She held his eyes. "That's what you said about the mine," she said. "I was there. I did what was there to do." "Yes," he said. "Nathan," she said. "At some point you're going to have to let yourself want to do the thing instead of just doing it because it's there." He said nothing for a moment. "I know," he said. She nodded. She looked back at the ledger. He went to make coffee because coffee was what the situation called for, and because he needed something to do with his hands while the larger thing sorted itself out. The storm came on a Sunday. Not metaphorically, actually, physically, the kind of Montana November storm that people who have lived there all their lives respect, and people who haven't learned to respect it make the particular category of mistake that sometimes cannot be recovered from. He heard it building through the night, the wind changing pitch, the temperature dropping in the specific fast way that preceded the serious weather, and he was dressed and in the barn at 4 a.m, securing everything that needed securing before the worst of it arrived. She was already in the barn when he got there. He should not have been surprised. He was not really. "The Doyle place," she said when she heard him come in. She was checking the horse harnesses with the efficient manner of a woman who has already thought through the next 3 hours. "James's roof has been patching since September. If this is what I think it is." "It's what you think it is," he said. "And the Mason family. Robert mentioned last week that they're—" "I know," he said. He had been running the same inventory in his head since he'd woken at 3:30. The mine families on the North Ridge, 3 households, 3 roofs of varying quality. One of them he had seen himself and knew to be more hope than structure. "We can't take the wagon in this," she said. "No," he agreed. "Horses." "Can you—" She stopped. He knew what she'd stopped before. "Yes," he said. Not harshly, just clearly. She looked at him. "I know you can ride. I know the leg doesn't stop you. I'm asking about the cold and the distance and whether—" "Evelyn," he said. "Yes." "Saddle the bay," he said. "I'll take the gray." She saddled the bay. He saddled the gray. They rode out into a November Montana storm toward the North Ridge, with the specific calm of people who have decided something is necessary and have organized themselves accordingly. The ride to the Doyle place was 40 minutes in good weather. In the storm, with the wind working against them and the trail uncertain, it was closer to an hour and a quarter. He rode ahead where he knew the path, and she followed with the complete trust of a woman who has learned the specific difference between trust that is given and trust that is earned. James Doyle met them at the door. "Nathan?" He looked at them both, at the snow on their coats, at the fact that they had come in this, and his face did the thing faces do when people realize something about you that changes their understanding. "You didn't have to." "The roof?" Nathan said. "How bad?" "Northeast corner," James said. "It started an hour ago. Ruth's got the kids in the back room. They went in." Nathan looked at the roof. The northeast corner was flexing in a way that roof corners should not flex, and he made a rapid assessment of what needed doing and what materials were available and how much time there was before the flexing became something worse. "I need rope and whatever timber you have," he said to James. "I have rope," James said. "The timber is—" "I saw a woodpile on the south side," Evelyn said. She was already moving toward the door. "Enough to brace the corner from inside. Nathan, if you tell me where to put it, I'll do the interior work while you two handle the roof." He looked at her. "I can hold a brace," she said. "Tell me where." He told her where. She held the brace. James and Nathan went up on the roof in the middle of a November Montana storm, and they secured what could be secured, and it was not graceful, and it was not safe in any conventional sense. And Nathan's left leg had things to say about the angle of the roof and the cold and the sustained effort that he listened to and then did not act on because the roof needed to be secured, and that was the thing that mattered. They came down. The corner held. Ruth Doyle made coffee that was the best coffee Nathan had ever tasted, which had less to do with the coffee and more to do with what preceded it. "We need to check the Mason place," Evelyn said while they drank it. "I know," Nathan said. "Your leg," she said. Not a question. Not a performance of concern. Just a statement of something she had noticed and was naming directly because she was a woman who named things directly. "I know," he said again. He felt it, the specific protest of a structure that had been rebuilt imperfectly and was now being told to do the work it had been rebuilt for. "It'll hold for the Mason place." She looked at him with the steady, assessing look. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he said. "If it doesn't—" "Evelyn," he said. "If it doesn't, I'll tell you, and we'll deal with it then." He paused. "That's what you do, isn't it? Deal with the thing when it happens." She held his eyes for a moment. "Yes," she said. "It is." They rode to the Mason place. Robert Mason's second youngest child, a girl of about 7 who had her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn jaw, opened the door before they knocked and said, "Pa said someone would come." Nathan looked at her. He knew. "He said Nathan Cole would come," she said with the complete certainty of a 7-year-old reporting a fact. "He said you always come." He stood in the doorway of the Mason house in a Montana storm, with snow on his coat and his leg making its case, and a 7-year-old looking up at him with the absolute confidence of someone who has been told a thing and believes it. And he felt the thing move through him again, the thing he did not yet have the exact right word for, which was something like, "This is what it is supposed to feel like. This is what the ranch is supposed to be for. This is what I have been not building toward for 7 years, and have been building toward for the last 30 days, without entirely knowing it. He looked back at Evelyn, who was dismounting behind him in the storm. She looked at him. She had heard what the child said. He could see it in her face. She didn't say anything. She went to work. Send. The Mason roof was worse than the Doyle roof. The northwest section had already given up on one of its primary beams and was being maintained by what Robert described with the honest brevity of a man who has been worried about this for some time as mostly optimism and some wire. Nathan assessed it. He looked at Robert. He looked at the wire. "How long has this been?" he started. "Summer," Robert said. "I've been meaning to—" "It's on the list," Nathan said. "As of today." He looked at Evelyn. "Can you manage the brace inside again?" "Show me where," she said. He showed her. She held it. He and Robert went up on the roof, which was in the storm and in the dark, and at an angle that his leg categorized as an extremely poor decision and his judgment categorized as necessary. They were up there for 40 minutes. The leg lasted 35. He felt it go not catastrophically. Not the way it had gone in the worst years, but with the specific sudden withdrawal of reliability that the left leg did when it had given what it had to give and was done. He managed the last 5 minutes through the particular focused will of a man who has learned to operate past the signal, because sometimes the signal is not the final word. He came down from the roof. He made it to the porch. He sat down on the porch step with the specific managed descent of someone who needs to sit immediately and has found the nearest available surface. Robert came down behind him. "Nathan." "It's fine," Nathan said. "The roof is done. Go inside." Robert looked at him, looked at the leg. "I'll get Evelyn." "Robert," Nathan said. "Go inside." Robert went inside. Evelyn appeared on the porch 30 seconds later. She sat down beside him on the porch step without comment, which was the right thing to do. She looked at the leg. She looked at the storm. She looked at him. "How bad?" she said. "Manageable," he said. "Don't do the thing," she said. He looked at her. "The thing where manageable means you'll manage it alone and not say anything," she said. "Don't do that." He looked at the yard. The snow was coming sideways now, which was the storm's way of saying it had found its full strength and intended to use it. "It's the muscle," he said. "Not the bone. The muscle gives out first when it's cold, and I've been working it." He paused. "It needs heat and rest. It'll be functional by morning." "Functional," she said. "Functional," he confirmed. "Not the same as fine," she said. "No," he admitted. "Not the same as fine." She put her hand on his arm. Not his hand. His arm. The coat-covered arm. The gesture of someone offering presents without requiring anything from it. He felt it through the coat. "You saved the Doyle roof and the Mason roof tonight," she said. "In a November storm. With your leg. The roofs needed, Nathan?" Her voice was quiet, but had the specific quality it got when she was saying something she meant completely. "You spent years believing that what happened to you made you less, that you had less to offer, that you were reduced to something smaller than what you had been." She looked at him. "Tonight, 3 families are warm because of you. A 7-year-old girl told me her father said you would come. Robert Mason, who you pulled out of a mine 7 years ago, built his daughter's certainty around the fact of you." He was quiet. "That is not a reduced man," she said. "That is a man who has not been looking at himself clearly." He looked at her. In the dark of the porch in the storm, with the snow coming sideways, and his leg making its case, and 30 days of accumulation behind them. "Evelyn," he said. "Yes, I have not let myself—" He stopped. He started again. "I told myself for 7 years that there were things I had no right to want because wanting them would only—" He stopped again. "I am not good at this," he said. "Saying the thing." "You're better than you think," she said. He looked at her. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, not as a declaration, as a fact. The same way she stated all the facts that mattered, plain direct without dressing it up. "I came here for work and the work is real. But I am also here because when I came through that gate a month ago, I found something I hadn't expected to find." She paused. A man who does the right thing and then immediately argues about whether it counts. He felt the laugh before it came real unexpected, the kind that arrived when something was simultaneously too true and too absurd. "You said that would be frustrating," he said. "It is," she said. "And it is also," she paused, "it is also one of my favorite things about you." She held his eyes. "I have several. I can list them if necessary." He looked at her. "That won't be necessary," he said. "Good," she said. The storm went on around them. His leg went on making its case. The Mason house was warm, and the Doyle house was warm, and somewhere on the North Ridge, the third family was also warm, because they had been reached before the storm decided to be fully what it was. "We should go in," she said. "Your leg needs heat." "Yes," he said. She stood. She held out her hand, not the way people held out hands to help him with the slight hesitation that meant they were worried about offering and worried about not offering in equal measure. She held it out the way you held out a hand to someone you wanted to help, straightforward and without apology. He took it. She helped him up. He put weight on the leg which protested but held. They went inside. Robert Mason saw him and said nothing except, "Fire's through here." They sat by the fire. Evelyn talked to Clara Mason about the supply schedule for December with the practical efficiency that never entirely turned off, and Nathan sat with his leg toward the heat and watched her talk and thought about what she had said on the porch. "I have several. I can list them if necessary." He thought about 30 days and a ledger and midnight coffee and Arthur Parker and a 7-year-old girl who had been told he would come and believed it. He thought, "I have been not building for 7 years. He thought, "I am done not building." He looked at Evelyn across the warm room of the Mason house in the storm on a Sunday night in November, and something settled in him that had not been settled in a very long time. Not resolved, not finished, settled. The way good timber settles into a frame, without noise, without drama, simply becoming part of the structure that everything else would stand on. He would tell her, not tonight. Tonight, they were in someone else's house, and his leg needed heat, and the storm needed to finish what it had started. But he would tell her. And he knew with the specific certainty of a man who had spent 7 years managing his expectations down to nothing, and was now finding that something entirely different was possible, that when he told her she would already know. Because she had been paying attention. She always had been. She always had been. And that was the thing he kept returning to in the days after the storm. The specific quality of her attention that had never been the watching kind. The kind that waited for weakness or cataloged limitation, but the kind that simply registered what was there and worked with it, the same way she worked with everything on the ranch, directly, without waste, with the complete confidence of a woman who trusted her own eyes. The storm lasted 2 days. They stayed at the Mason place the first night Robert insisted, and Nathan's leg provided the medical argument that his pride might otherwise have overridden. Clara Mason made up a room for Evelyn and a space near the fire for Nathan, and the storm threw itself against the windows with the full conviction of Montana in November, and inside the house was warm, and the children slept, and Robert and Nathan sat up for an hour after the women went to bed, and said almost nothing, which was the way of men who have known each other through something and don't need to fill the silence with words. At one point Robert said, "She's good for you." Nathan looked at the fire. "She's good at everything she does," he said. Robert looked at him with the patient expression of a man who has been married for 12 years and recognizes evasion. "That's not what I said." Nathan said nothing. Robert picked up his coffee. "A man spends 7 years alone," he said. "He forgets what it's supposed to feel like, having someone." He paused. "Doesn't mean he doesn't deserve it." Nathan looked at the fire for a long time. "I know," he said, and meant it for the first time with his full chest. They rode back to the Ridgeback Ranch the next morning when the storm had settled to the manageable kind. The trail was difficult but passable. His leg was stiff and specific about its opinions, and she rode beside him without comment, except once when the path narrowed and she moved her horse to the uphill side without being asked, which meant if anything went wrong on the trail, She would be between him and the drop, which was a thing so practical and so quietly done that he almost didn't notice it. He noticed it. He said nothing about it until they were through the narrow section and back on the wider path. Then he said, "You didn't have to do that." She knew exactly what he meant. "The horses are better on the downhill anyway," she said. "Evelyn. The bay is more sure-footed on loose ground," she said. It was a practical decision. He looked at her sideways. "Was it?" She looked at the road ahead. "It was also the other thing," she said. "Both can be true." He looked at the road too. Both things were true. That was something he was learning, that in the accounting of the life he was now living, things could be practical and also mean more than practical, and naming the second thing did not diminish the first. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," she said. "We're almost home." Home. He turned the word over in his mind as the Ridgeback Ranch came into view through the last of the November cold. He had lived on this property for 6 years, and he had called it many things: the ranch, the property, the place. And he had not in 6 years called it home, in a way that felt like the word meant something. He called it home in his mind now, and it fit the way words fit when they have found the right place. She went to check the livestock. The storm had not been kind to the north paddock fence. She'd noticed it from the road, and was already calculating what the repair required before they were fully through the gate. He went to the main house to start the stove, because the house had been cold for 2 days, and cold houses needed attention before anything else. He had the stove going, and the coffee started when she came in. She looked at the kitchen, at the stove, at the coffee, at the table where she had left the 2 letters in the corner, and her face had the particular quality it got when she was registering something that pleased her but had not been planned. "You made coffee," she said. "It's cold," he said. "You always make coffee when it's cold," she said. She sat down at the table and pulled the corner letters toward her without opening them, just touching them, the small gesture of checking on things. "The north fence needs 3 new posts. The storm took them. I'll put it on the list today." "Charlie Reese owes me a day's labor from the hay arrangement," Nathan said. "I'll call it in tomorrow." She looked at him. "You've been keeping track of that. You keep track of everything," he said. "It's contagious." She made a sound that was the nearest thing to a laugh he'd seen from her in 2 days. "I'll add that to the list of things I'm responsible for," she said. He brought the coffee to the table. He sat down across from her the way he sat now, directly across, without the slight angle he'd used in the first 2 weeks, the unconscious positioning of a man who was not sure how much space he was entitled to take up. He sat directly across from her and put his hands on the table and said, "I want to say something." She looked at him. "Last night," he said, "on the porch, you said you have things that you could list, about me." "I remember," she said. "I have things too," he said. "Things I notice, about you." He met her eyes. "I haven't said them. I've been managing carefully, the way I manage most things. Not saying the complicated thing, because the complicated thing has too many." He stopped, started again. "I've been afraid that if I say it, the arrangement changes, and the arrangement has been—" He paused. "Good, better than anything I've had in 7 years." She was very still, listening. The real listening, not the waiting kind. "And I would rather keep the arrangement as it is," he said, "than risk it by saying something that changes it into something you didn't come here for." She looked at him for a long moment. "Nathan," she said. "What did I come here for?" "Work," he said. "A position. A practical. That's why I wrote the letter," she said. "That's not the only reason I stayed." She held his eyes. "I've had 6 weeks to leave. The lawyer situation could have been handled from Butte. My cousin Margaret is kind. The work here is hard, and the isolation is real, and the town has opinions." She paused. "I'm still here." "I know," he said. "Why do you think that is?" she said. He looked at his hands on the table. "I think," he said carefully, "that you found something here that was worth staying for." "Yes," she said. "I did." She paused. "Tell me the things you notice." He looked up. "Tell me," she said again. Simple. Direct. No room for the argument about whether it counted. He told her. He told her about the way she organized the corner of the table, how he had watched it fill with the things that mattered to her, and understood something about how she processed the world. He told her about the morning he came to the barn and found her with the chicken coop, the deliberate, unhurried way she'd worked, and how it had reminded him of the way his father had taught him that you could tell everything about a person's character, from how they did the small jobs nobody was watching. He told her about the supply ledger page that said goodwill value significant, and what it had meant to him to see that someone had looked at his history with the Mine families and seen it as something to build on rather than something to manage around. He told her about the porch with Dorothy Crane, and how she had handled it not for him, but for the truth of the thing, with no performance and no apology. He told her about Arthur Parker and the moment he had moved between them, and how it had felt not protective in the way that made the other person feel small, but protective in the way that made him feel like himself. He told her about the Mason porch and the specific quality of her hand on his arm through his coat, and how it had been the first time in 7 years that someone had touched him in a way that was not trying to help him with his injury. He was quiet after he finished. She was looking at him with the open, honest expression she used when she was deciding whether to say the complete true thing. "I have a list too," she said. "I know," he said. "Do you want to hear it?" "Yes," he said. "I do," she told him. She told him in the same direct, unembellished way she did everything, and the list was not romantic in the theatrical sense, but was romantic in the real sense, which was that every item on it was specific and observed, and had been carried carefully for 6 weeks by a woman who did not carry things carelessly. When she finished, the kitchen was quiet. "Nathan," she said. "Yes, I am not going to be here forever as your housekeeper," she said. "That's not I want to be useful to this ranch, but I don't want to be useful to you in that particular capacity for the rest of my life." She held his eyes. "I want to be here as something else. If that's something you want." He looked at her. This was the moment. He had known it was coming, had felt it building through the storm and the porch and the ride back and the morning coffee, and he had planned at some point in his thinking to have the right words ready. He did not have the right words. He had the true ones. "I have been telling myself for 7 years," he said, "that the things I lost in that mine, the way I moved, the way I worked, the way I was, that those losses made me less of what a person needed, less than what you deserve." He paused. "I am not sure I believe that anymore." "You shouldn't believe it," she said. "It's not true." "I'm getting there," he said. She nodded. "Good," she said. "Get there faster." He almost smiled. "I'm working on it." She reached across the table and she covered his hands with hers, both hands flat and warm, the gesture of someone who has been waiting to do this and has decided the waiting is finished. "What do you want?" she said. "Not what you think you're entitled to, not what you think makes sense given the arrangement. What do you want?" He looked at her hands on his. "You," he said. Simple, true, without the argument about whether it counted. She held his hands. She held his eyes. "Good," she said. "That's settled then." It was not, of course, entirely settled. Settling things took time, and there were practical considerations, and the town had opinions which it intended to share. But the thing between them was settled in the way that mattered, which was inside the people it concerned, and what came after was the working out of something already decided. The working out included the town. Red Willow's response to the development was predictable in most respects and surprising in one. The predictable part, Dorothy Crane arrived again. This time she came alone, which Nathan took as a good sign. A solo Dorothy meant a personal visit rather than an official delegation. She sat in the kitchen with her coat still on and her hands in her lap and said, "I owe you an apology, Evelyn." Evelyn looked at her. For what specifically? For assuming, Dorothy said. When you arrived, I assumed you were that the situation was I assumed things about why a woman would come here and what she was capable of, and what was appropriate for her. She paused. The storm showed me things about what you're actually capable of. James Doyle told half the town what you and Nathan did on Sunday night. Robert Mason told the other half. She sat up slightly straighter, which was Dorothy's version of doing something difficult. I was wrong about the picture I had. Evelyn looked at her for a moment. Thank you, Dorothy, she said. That took courage to say. Dorothy sniffed. I'm not known for lacking courage. No, Evelyn agreed. You're not. Dorothy looked at Nathan, then back at Evelyn, then at the two of them together at the table, with the particular clarity of a woman who has been reading situations for 67 years and knows what she's reading. Well, she said, I suppose this makes sense. She stood. I'll see myself out. She left. Nathan looked at Evelyn. That, Evelyn said, was Dorothy Crane admitting she was wrong, which I understand from Tom Henley happens approximately once per decade. Less, Nathan said. Then we should mark the occasion, she said. She stood and went to the stove with the ordinary efficient movement of a woman who has decided something important and is now making coffee about it, which was her particular way of marking occasions. The surprising part of Red Willow's response came from Roy Teague. Roy arrived on a Thursday, which was his usual day, and he sat at the table with the careful posture of a man who has rehearsed something. He looked at Nathan. He looked at Evelyn. He looked at the ledger she had open in front of her, at the accounts that were 3 months current and accurate to the dollar. I've been a fool, Roy said. Nathan said nothing. 7 years, Roy said. 7 years I've been coming over here with my concern, my help, He stopped. I told myself I was looking out for you. I told myself that's what a neighbor did. But the truth is, he looked at his hands. The truth is I was looking at what happened to you, and I was seeing the end of a story. And I kept treating you like the end of a story, instead of... Roy, Nathan said. Roy looked up. I know, Nathan said. And I know you meant well. I've always known that. That's not enough, Roy said. Meaning well and doing right are different things. Yes, Nathan said. They are. Roy nodded. He looked at Evelyn. She's good for you, he said. And from what I hear, you've been good for things too. James Doyle says... Roy? Nathan said again. Roy stopped. Thank you for coming, Nathan said. Stay for lunch. Roy stayed for lunch. He talked to Evelyn about the Bellamy Hay arrangement with the specific interest of a man who is now paying attention to what he'd been dismissing and is recalculating accordingly. He ate 3 helpings of the stew she'd made. When he left, he shook Nathan's hand with the grip that meant something. Better late, he said. Better late, Nathan agreed. Arthur Parker's lawyer sent a letter in December. It was a short letter. The shortest legal letter Nathan had ever seen, which was, he had come to understand its own kind of statement, the length of a lawyer's letter being inversely proportional to how much they had left to work with. In the matter of Parker versus Parker estate, upon review of the documentation provided, we are unable to identify sufficient grounds to proceed. We are advising our client accordingly. Consider this matter closed. Evelyn read it at the kitchen table. She set it down. She put it in the corner with the other letters. She went back to the supply records. Nathan watched her do this the complete composed manner of a woman receiving good news, the same way she received hard news, which was without performance, just acknowledgement and continuance. It's over, he said. It's over, she confirmed. How do you feel? He said. She looked up. Like I want to update the December supply projections, she said. And then perhaps take a walk. And then... She paused. And then I want to talk to you about something. He waited. Not now, she said. After supper. He spent the afternoon with the kind of focused distraction of a man who has been told that something is going to be said after supper and cannot entirely prevent himself from thinking about what it might be. He fixed the last of the north fence posts. He checked on the horses. He did the things that needed doing, because the things that needed doing were still there, regardless of what was going to be said after supper. Supper was the meal. It always was functional and good with the easy competence she brought to everything. They talked about the December delivery schedule and the Bellamy surplus, and a letter from the Granger family who had apparently reconsidered the hay arrangement and wanted to discuss terms. After supper, she put the dishes in the basin, and she turned around and looked at him. "I've been thinking about the arrangement," she said. He was very still. "The employment arrangement." "Yes," she said. "It doesn't make sense anymore." He looked at her. "In what way doesn't it make sense?" "In the way that the terms no longer reflect the reality," she said. She came to the table and sat down, not across from him but beside him, which was different. A small physical distinction that told him something before she said the next thing. "I'm not a housekeeper who is also becoming something else. I'm something else who has been technically employed as a housekeeper. The arrangement needs to reflect what's actually true." He looked at her. What would the new arrangement look like? She held his eyes. "Partnership," she said. "Full partnership. I am not interested in a situation where my standing here depends on an employment contract." She paused. "I've been in a situation before where my standing was contingent on circumstances outside my control. I'm not doing that again." "I'm not Thomas's brother," he said. "I know you're not," she said. "This isn't about him. This is about what I need the foundation to be." She looked at him steadily. "I need to know that I'm here because you want me here, not because you employ me here." He looked at her for a long moment. He thought about 6 weeks, 30 days of Ledgers and Mine families, and Arthur Parker, and a November storm, and a porch in the dark, and hands on the table. He thought about Roy Teague's "She's Good for You," and Robert Mason's "He Always Comes," and a 7-year-old girl's absolute certainty. He thought about 7 years of managing his life down to the smallest possible footprint, and what it had felt like on the day she rode through his gate to find that the footprint wanted to expand. He thought about what he had said to himself in the Mason house by the fire, "I am done not building." "Evelyn," he said. "Yes." "What I want," he said, "is to stop describing this as an arrangement." He paused. "What I want is for you to be here because this is yours too. The ranch, the accounts, the Mine families, all of it. Yours." He held her eyes. "What I want, if you're willing, is for you to stay. Not as my employee, as my partner." He paused. "And not only as my partner in the ranch." She looked at him. "Are you asking me to marry you?" she said, in the most indirect way I have ever heard a proposal delivered. "I'm asking you to be my partner," he said. "In every sense of the word. Legally. Formally." He paused. "And I am aware that this is indirect, and I'm working on being less indirect about things that matter, but I'm 39 years old, and this is only the second time in my life I've—" He stopped, breathed. "Yes," he said. "I'm asking you to marry me." She looked at him for a long moment. "Nathan," she said. "Yes." "When I wrote that letter in Butte," she said, "I wrote 7 drafts. 6 of them were too careful, too managed. They said the right things in the right order, and they didn't sound like me." She paused. "The 7th one I wrote in 20 minutes, and I sent it before I could revise it again. That's the one you got." "I know," he said. "It was the best one." "I know it was," she said, "because it said what was true." She held his eyes. "What's true now is yes. Of course yes. It was yes before you asked if you want to know." He looked at her. "That would have been useful information earlier," he said. "You needed to ask," she said. "Some things need to be asked." He took her hand. She let him take it. They sat at the kitchen table of the Ridgeback Ranch on a December evening with the stove going, and the ledger on the desk, and the corner full of letters, and it was ordinary and extraordinary in the way that the best things always were, and neither of them said anything for a moment because nothing needed to be said. Then she said, "The December supply order needs to go out tomorrow." I know, he said. And the Granger letter needs a reply. I know, he said. And the North Paddock Post, Evelyn, he said. She looked at him. I know, he said one more time and meant it entirely, all of it, the supply order, and the Granger letter, and the North Paddock Post, and the mine families, and the town, and the months ahead, and the life they were going to build in all the ways it needed building. She smiled. The real one, the full one, the one he had been waiting to see, turned toward him without the slight professional reserve that had been there in the beginning. Good, she said. He held her hand across the kitchen table, and outside the December dark of Montana pressed against the windows, and the ranch was warm, and everything that was going to happen next was already in motion, and already, in all the ways that mattered, decided. Everything that was going to happen next was already in motion, and already in all the ways that mattered, decided. And what Nathan Cole discovered in the weeks that followed was that decided and finished were very different things, and that the distance between a decision made at a kitchen table in December and a life fully lived was exactly the length of all the work that remained. There was considerable work remaining. He did not mind this. He had never minded work. What he had minded for 7 years was working toward nothing, the specific hollowness of effort that had no direction, that maintained a status quo he had not chosen and could not see past. What was different now was that the work had a shape, a future attached to it. A person sitting across the table from him who updated the supply records on Monday and Thursday and asked him direct questions and put important letters in the corner and had said yes, of course yes, it was yes, before you asked, with the particular calm certainty of a woman who had known something for a while and was glad the other person had finally caught up. He was glad too. He realized glad in a way he had not been since before the mine. Not the managed, careful gladness of a man rationing his expectations, but the real kind, the kind that didn't require maintenance, that simply existed because the circumstances warranted it. December moved fast, the way months move when they are full of things. The Granger family's response to Evelyn's reply came within the week. They wanted 4 tons of hay at the arranged price, which was more than she'd projected, and which meant adjusting the winter reserve calculations, which she had done before he'd finished reading the letter. The mine family's December supply delivery happened on a Wednesday, and James Doyle's wife, Ruth, pressed a jar of preserves into Evelyn's hands at the door and said quietly, so the children wouldn't hear, "James told me about you two. I'm glad." Evelyn looked at the jar. She looked at Ruth. "Thank you," she said. "You're good for him," Ruth said. "And She paused. "He's been good for James too. Even when he wasn't here. James always said if Nathan Cole got through what he got through, then I can get through this. Whatever this is." She paused. "He should know that. Someone should tell him." "I'll tell him," Evelyn said. She told him on the drive back, without preamble, the way she told things that mattered directly in the plain words without softening or ornament. Nathan listened. He held the reins. He looked at the road. "James said that," he said. "Ruth said James said it," she said. Yes, he was quiet for a long time. Long enough that she let him be quiet, which was one of the things about her that he was still 2 months in, actively grateful for the ability to understand when silence was processing and not avoidance. "I've been thinking of the accident as the thing that reduced me," he said. "For 7 years, that's the story I've been telling. That everything after was less." He paused. "But James used it to survive his own hard years. Robert named his son for me. A 7-year-old girl assumed I would come in a storm because her father told her I would." He looked at the road. "That's not the story of a reduced man." "No," she said. "It isn't." "It took you to show me that," he said. "It took you to be willing to see it," she said. "I just handed you the ledger. You're the one who read it." He looked at her sideways. "That's very generous." "It's accurate," she said. "I'm always accurate." He almost smiled. "I know," he said. "It's one of my favorite things about you." She turned to look at him. He could feel it. "You have a list," she said. "I'm developing one," he said. She faced forward again. He could hear the smile in her silence. Martin. They were married on a Saturday in January, not a large ceremony. Neither of them wanted large, they had talked about it once briefly, and reached the same conclusion from different directions, which was that the marriage was the thing and the ceremony was the acknowledgement of the thing, and the acknowledgement did not need to be elaborate to be real. Reverend Michaels performed it with the genuine warmth of a man who had been wrong about something and was glad to be wrong. He said afterward to Nathan, "I should have come with less concern and more faith in you a long time ago." "You meant well," Nathan said, and meant it the same way he'd meant it with Roy. The people who came were the people who mattered, the Doyle family, the Mason family, the Parkers from the North Ridge, Tom Henley and his wife, Roy Teague, who stood in the back with his hat in his hands and the expression of a man who has revised a long-held opinion and is still getting used to the revision, Frank Bellamy, who said nothing except good when he arrived, and nothing except good when he left, which for Frank Bellamy was a speech. Dorothy Crane came in her best coat and sat in the front row and cried, which surprised everyone, including Dorothy. Evelyn wore a dress she had made herself not white. She had said practically because white was not a practical color for a ranch, and she was a practical woman, but a deep blue that Nathan had not seen her in before, and which he registered with the specific attention of a man who has been paying attention for 2 months and notices everything. He had managed to say this to her before the ceremony, in the quiet moment before Reverend Michaels began, when it was just the two of them for 30 seconds. "You look," he said. "Practical," she said. "Beautiful," he said, without the argument about whether it counted. She looked at him. She did not deflect it, and she did not minimize it. She received it the way she received things that were true directly, completely. "Thank you," she said. Then Reverend Michaels began. January passed into February, and February into March, and the Ridgeback Ranch moved through the winter the way things moved when they were being actively tended, not easily, because nothing on the Montana frontier was easy, but forward with direction toward something. The horse training arrangement had produced its first real client by February, a rancher named Sven Lindqvist from the East Valley, who had 3 young horses that needed working, and who had heard from Frank Bellamy, which Nathan had not expected, that Nathan Cole trained horses the way people should train horses, and didn't overcharge for it. Sven came on a Tuesday. He looked at the horses. He looked at Nathan work with them for 20 minutes. He said, "All 3, when can you start?" "Next week," Nathan said. Sven looked at the ranch with the assessing gaze of a working man evaluating another working man's operation. "You've been sitting on this," he said. "This place. Should have been doing this years ago." "Yes," Nathan said. "I should have." "What changed?" Sven said. Nathan looked at the main house. Through the window he could see Evelyn at the desk updating the accounts, the familiar shape of her at work. "My perspective," he said. Sven looked at the window, then at Nathan. He nodded once, the nod of a man who understands exactly what he's been told and doesn't need it elaborated. "Next week," Sven said, and wrote out. The training arrangement added $30 to the February accounts. Evelyn recorded it with the same steady hand she used for everything. She handed him the ledger to review the way she always did, and he looked at the number and looked at her. "You're not going to say anything," he said. "The number is correct," she said. "What else is there to say?" In September, he said, this ledger showed 12 months of flat accounts and a supply deficit. "I know," she said. "I fixed the supply deficit in the first week." "Evelyn," he said. She looked up from the page she was already writing. "This is..." He held up the ledger. "What you've done with this ranch, what we've done, this is..." "It's a good month," she said. "Write it down and keep going." He looked at her. She was already looking back at the next page. He set the ledger on the desk, and he stood there for a moment, and he thought about the word significant, which she had written in the same ledger 4 months ago, and which had turned out to be the most accurate word in the whole document. 10. The twist that came in March arrived without warning, the way the best and worst things did. A letter from Helena. Not Arthur Parker's lawyer. He was finished gone silent since December, in the way of a man who has assessed his position and found it untenable. This was different. It was addressed to both of them, Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Cole Ridgeback Ranch, Red Willow, Montana. He brought it to her. She read it with him standing beside her. He read it over her shoulder. It was from a man named Aldridge Fletcher. Not Dr. Aldridge, who had set Nathan's leg, a different Aldridge entirely. An Aldridge in Helena, who described himself as representing the interests of the Harlan Mining Company's successor organization, which had purchased the assets of the original Harlan mine operation, and was now engaged in assessing outstanding obligations. Outstanding obligations. He felt the cold go through him before he understood exactly why. Evelyn read faster than him, she always did, and she reached the relevant paragraph before he did, and he heard her breath change. She handed him the letter, pointed to the paragraph. He read it. The Harlan mine collapse of 7 years ago. 3 workers rescued. 2 of the 3 had subsequently filed claims with the original company that had never been processed before the company dissolved. The successor organization, as part of its asset assumption, had also assumed those outstanding claims. They were writing to Nathan Cole as the person identified in the original incident report, as the individual whose actions had resulted in, and here was the sentence that required him to read it twice. The preservation of life, for which the company acknowledges a debt of gratitude and an outstanding financial obligation. He set the letter down. They want to pay you, Evelyn said. He looked at her. The successor company, she said. They've assumed the original company's obligations. One of those obligations is apparently some form of recognition or compensation for what you did. She paused. Fletcher says there's a meeting in Helena, that he would like you to come. Nathan looked at the letter. I didn't do it for money, he said. I know, she said. I never filed any claim. I never expected. I know, she said again. He was quiet. He looked at the letter. He looked at the name at the bottom. Aldridge Fletcher, with an address in Helena and a neat professional signature. What do you think it means? He said. I think it means, she said carefully, that someone has been going through old records and found an unresolved obligation and is trying to resolve it. She paused. The question is whether you want to go to Helena. Do you think I should? She looked at him steadily. I think, she said, that you spent 7 years believing the mine took something from you that was never coming back. I think it took your leg, and your certainty, and your willingness to expect things. She paused. And I think that if the company that owned that mine has decided they owe you something, you are allowed to go to Helena and find out what. He looked at the letter for a long time. Come with me, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I was going to suggest it. No. They went to Helena on a Thursday in late March, which was Nathan's first trip to Helena in 3 years. The city had the particular quality of a place considerably larger than what he was accustomed to. More noise, more people. The specific density of a territorial capital going about its business with the conviction that its business mattered. Aldridge Fletcher's office was on the second floor of a building on Last Chance Gulch, which was Helena's main street, and had the slightly grandiose quality of a city that had been very important very recently and intended to remain so. Fletcher was 50 precise with the organized manner of a man who dealt in obligations and took the word seriously. He shook Nathan's hand. He shook Evelyn's hand with the slight adjustment of someone who had expected to meet one person and found 2 and was recalibrating efficiently. He offered them chairs. He sat. Mr. Cole, he said. Thank you for coming. I'll be direct. Please, Nathan said. The Harlan Mining Company dissolved 4 years ago, Fletcher said. Its assets and obligations were purchased by the Western Territorial Mining Consortium, which I represent. As part of the asset assumption, we conducted a review of outstanding claims and obligations. He opened a file. The incident of October 1875, the collapse of the third tunnel. 3 workers trapped. You entered the tunnel and extracted all 3. He looked at Nathan. The original incident report identifies you as the sole civilian to enter the tunnel. You were not employed by the company. You received no compensation. 2 of the 3 workers subsequently filed gratitude claims with the original company requesting that you be recognized and compensated. Those claims were never processed before the company dissolved. Nathan was very still. "We're honoring them," Fletcher said. "Both claims. Combined, they represent an acknowledgement payment of $450 plus." He paused. "Plus a formal letter of recognition from the consortium, which I am authorized to deliver today, if you'll accept it." $450. The number sat in the room. Evelyn beside him was completely still, in the way she was when something had landed that she was receiving carefully. "Who filed the claims?" Nathan said. Fletcher looked at the file. "James Doyle and Robert Mason," he said. "Both within a year of the incident. The original company's administrative collapse meant the claims were never actioned." Nathan looked at his hands. James Doyle and Robert Mason, who had filed claims on his behalf within a year of the incident, who had in the years that followed built their lives and named their children and maintained their absolute certainty that he would come when they needed him, and had never said a word about the claims, had perhaps not known they had never been processed, had perhaps decided it didn't matter because the man they'd filed them for had gone somewhere past the reach of what a company's acknowledgement could fix. "Nathan," Evelyn said very quietly. He looked at her. Her face had the open expression, not the work face, not the ledger face, the other one, the one she showed him in the evenings when it was just the 2 of them, and the ranch and the truth of things. "Take the letter," she said, "and the payment." She held his eyes. "Not because you did it for money. Because James and Robert wanted you to have it. Because that's what they could do to say what they needed to say." She paused. "Let them say it." He looked at her for a moment. He turned back to Fletcher. "I'll take the letter," he said. "And I'd like the payment to go to 2 things. Half to the mine families, all 3 households on the North Ridge divided equally. Half to the ranch." He paused. "As a joint account, in both our names." Fletcher looked at Evelyn. "Mrs. Cole?" "That's correct," she said. Fletcher wrote it down. He produced the letter. It was formal and precise in the way of official documents, which sometimes managed to say the important thing despite the formality. It said that Nathan Cole had in October of 1875 entered a collapsed mine tunnel without obligation, without compensation, and without regard for his own safety, and had extracted 3 persons whose survival was directly attributable to his actions. It said that the Western Territorial Mining Consortium, as successor to the Harlan Mining Company, wished to acknowledge this formally and completely. It said, "This debt cannot be fully repaid. It can only be recognized." Nathan folded the letter carefully. He put it in his coat pocket against his chest. He stood. He shook Fletcher's hand. "Thank you," he said. "Thank James Doyle and Robert Mason," Fletcher said. "They're the ones who filed." They rode back to Red Willow on a Thursday afternoon with the letter in Nathan's coat and the account paperwork in Evelyn's bag, and the particular quality of a day that has held something large and is now settling. An hour out of Helena, she said, "How do you feel?" He thought about it honestly. He had learned from her that she asked this question because she wanted the honest answer and not the managed one, and he had gotten better at knowing the difference. "Like someone just handed me back something I thought I'd lost," he said. "Not the money, the accounting of it." He paused. 7 years ago, I went into that mine, and I came out different, and I spent 7 years treating the difference as a reduction, as the story of what I'd lost." He looked at the road. James and Robert filed those claims within a year. A year after it happened, they were already trying to... He stopped. "They saw what happened differently than I did. They always did. You couldn't see it from where you were standing," she said. "No," he said. "I needed someone to change my position." She looked at him. "You changed it," he said. "You let me," she said. He nodded. "Yes," he said. "I did." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "The half for the ranch, the joint account." "Yes," he said. "You didn't tell me you were going to do that. she said. I decided in the moment, he said. Was that, it was right, she said. I just... She paused. I want you to know what it means to me. That you did that without asking. That you just... She stopped. It's your ranch, he said. It has been since November. She pressed her lips together. He could see her doing the thing she did when something had arrived that she was holding carefully. Nathan, she said. Yes. I want to tell you something, she said, that I haven't said directly. He waited. When I wrote that letter in Butte, she said, I was trying to survive. That was the complete truth of it. I had nothing left, and I needed work, and I found your notice, and I wrote the best version of the truth I could. She looked at the road. I did not expect to find what I found. I did not expect you. The ranch, the ledger, the mine families, the storm. Any of it. She paused. I've been useful to this ranch. I know that. But this ranch has given me something I didn't have in Butte. Something I hadn't had since Thomas died. What? He said. A place, she said. A real one. Not just a room in someone else's house, not just an arrangement. A place that is mine in the way places are mine when you've worked them and loved them and built them. She looked at him. You gave me that. By opening the gate. By putting $12 on the table. By standing in the yard when Arthur Parker came. By going up on a roof in a November storm. She paused. You gave me a home, and I want you to know I know it. He looked at her. You gave me one too, he said. She nodded. Once. The nod that said, received. Understood. Filed in the place where the important things live. They rode the last hour to Red Willow in the silence that was theirs, warm and inhabited, and not requiring anything except being in it together. April arrived with the specific announcement of Montana spring. Not gentle, nothing in Montana was gentle, but definitive. The snow receded. The pasture began its slow return to green. The horses moved differently, the particular loosening of animals that have been through a hard winter and can feel the other side of it. Nathan moved differently too. This was something Red Willow noticed and talked about in the way Red Willow noticed and talked about everything, which was thoroughly and with the slight competitive edge of people who take civic observation seriously. Tom Henley mentioned it to Roy Teague. Roy mentioned it to the Reeve brothers, who were newcomers to the observation, but caught up quickly. Dorothy Crane, who was the town's most reliable narrator of its own story, said to Mrs. Flannery outside the seamstress shop, He walks the same. The leg is what it is. But he doesn't walk like the leg is what it is anymore. You understand what I mean? Mrs. Flannery, who was 64 and had been watching people her whole life, said, I understand exactly what you mean. What Dorothy meant, and what she was right about, was this. For 7 years Nathan Cole had walked through Red Willow with the particular posture of a man managing a story about himself. A man who knew what people saw when they looked at him and had organized his body around. That knowledge had made himself smaller and more careful and more managed than he had been before the mind had preempted the pity and the avoidance and the recalibration by doing a version of it to himself first. He stopped doing that in April. It happened without ceremony. One Thursday on the supply run, he drove the wagon through the main street of Red Willow, and he sat straight on the seat, and he looked at the people he passed, and he did not look away first. And the people who looked back at him found a man who met them directly, who did not apologize for the leg, or for being there, or for having a life that had turned out to be considerably more than Red Willow had predicted. Dale Carver of all people was the one who said it plainly. Dale was 25, and had spent most of his life being the kind of young man who said things without thinking about the cost. But he had been thinking more since the conversation in Tom Henley's store, since Evelyn had told him about the fence line, and said to tell his father, and his father had said after a long pause that the Whitfield woman was probably right about the fence, and that he should perhaps think more carefully before he spoke in future. Dale saw Nathan on the main street and said, "You look different, Mr. Cole." Nathan looked at him. "Dale?" "I mean it as a compliment," Dale said with the slight awkwardness of a young man trying to be better than his instincts. You look like things are going well. They are, Nathan said. Dale nodded. He looked like he wanted to say something else. Then, I'm sorry for things I said before, when you first came to town with your wife. He stopped. I didn't say anything directly, but I was thinking it, and thinking it is the same as Dale, Nathan said. Dale stopped. Learn from it, Nathan said. That's all. Just learn from it. Dale nodded. He walked on. Nathan drove the wagon to Tom Henley's and picked up the supply order and drove home. And when he came through the gate and she came to the porch, and he handed her the first item off the wagon before she could come down the steps to get it herself, and she looked at him and said, "Good trip." "Good trip," he said. She looked at his face, the specific attentive look. Then, something happened. "Nothing dramatic," he said. "Just—" He handed her the next supply box. "Red Willow is catching up." She understood what he meant. She nodded. She took the box inside. He followed with the rest. James Doyle came to the ranch on a Wednesday in April without his family, which meant he had come to say something he had decided to say alone. Nathan was in the paddock. James came to the fence and stood there the way he had stood in his own doorway in November, with the full weight of something he had been carrying and had decided to set down. "The claims," James said. Nathan looked at him. "Fletcher told you." "Fletcher's letter came last week," James said, "to tell us the payment had been made." He looked at the fence. "You put half back for the families." "It was yours to give," Nathan said. "I just redirected it." James was quiet for a moment. "I filed that claim in 1876, he said. "Robert and I filed them the same week. We talked about it, whether it would mean something." He paused. "The company never responded. We figured it had gotten lost. We figured—" He stopped. "We figured maybe it was just something we did for ourselves. To have done something." "It wasn't lost," Nathan said. "It was just late." James looked at him. "Are you all right?" he said. "With how it came out?" Nathan looked at the paddock, at the 3 horses at the spring pasture coming in at the gate, through which Sven Lindqvist's horses had come and gone 6 times since February. At the main house with the lamp in the kitchen window that was there because someone was in the kitchen, because the kitchen was occupied, because the ranch was a place where someone lived. "Yes," he said. "I'm all right." James nodded. He looked at the main house. "She's good," he said. "I know," Nathan said. "Ruth says she's the reason you're—" James paused. "Ruth says you're different." "I am different," Nathan said. "She's right about the reason." Nathan looked at the house again, at the window, at the familiar shape behind the glass. "She's part of it," he said. "But she keeps telling me she just handed me the ledger, that I'm the one who read it." James thought about this. "Is she right?" Nathan was quiet for a moment. "We're both right," he said. "That's what a partnership is." James smiled, the real full smile of a man who has heard something true and recognized it. "Yeah," he said. "It is." He shook Nathan's hand. He rode home. Nathan stood at the fence for a moment longer. He looked at the ranch, at all of it, the full spread of what it was and what it was becoming. The expanded hay operation, and the horse training, and the Mine family's supply route, and the accounts that were growing in the right direction, and the winter that had been gotten through, and the spring that had arrived exactly when it was supposed to. He looked at all of it, and he felt what he had been building toward for 4 months, which was the specific, grounded certainty of a man who knows where he is, and knows it is the right place, and knows how he got there. He went inside. She was at the desk. The ledger was open. The April accounts were being entered with the deliberate precision that was one of the things on his list, the list he was developing, the list that was considerably longer than hers, but no less true for the length. She looked up when he came in. "James went," she said. "James went," he said. "Good visit, good visit." He crossed the room and stood behind her and looked at the ledger over her shoulder, the way he sometimes did not, checking her work. He never needed to check her work, but being present in the same space, the way they were present in the same space, which was without requiring anything except the fact of it. "The April numbers are good," she said. "I know," he said. "Better than March." "I know. By spring end we'll be at—" "Evelyn," he said. She stopped. She tilted her head back slightly to look up at him. "I know," he said again. "All of it. The numbers and the accounts and the mine families and the horse training and the Granger arrangement and the spring pasture and James Doyle's handshake and Dorothy Crane's revision and Roy Teague's better late and everything that had accumulated into this particular Wednesday in April at the desk in the Ridgeback Ranch." She looked up at him. "I know too," she said. He put his hand on her shoulder. She put her hand over his. They stayed like that for a moment, not long, because the ledger was open, and the April accounts needed finishing, and the horses needed their evening check, and the supply order for May needed to be started, because the work was always there and always would be, and neither of them would have it differently. Then she picked up her pen. He went to start the stove. The ranch moved into its evening in the specific, ordinary, entirely irreplaceable way of a place that is fully itself tended and working and inhabited by people who have chosen it and each other and all the hard, specific daily work of a life built from the ground up. Red Willow had said no woman would ever marry Nathan Cole. Red Willow had been wrong in the particular way of people who looked at what a person had lost and forgot to look at what remained. What remained in Nathan Cole? What had always remained through 7 years of managed silence and deliberate smallness, and the specific discipline of a man who had learned to want less, so that losing less would hurt less, was a man of complete character. A man who went into collapsed mines and stayed to the end. A man who brought supplies to families on North Ridges without being asked. A man who put himself between the people he loved and the things that came for them, not because he had been told to, but because he was the kind of man who did. Evelyn Parker had not fixed him. She had not saved him. She had done the thing that required the most specific kind of courage. She had looked at a man the world had written off and read him accurately. And then she had stayed long enough for him to read himself the same way. That was the whole story. A man who thought he was broken. A woman who read the ledger and found something different. And the ranch they built together from 2 lives that had each been through the specific education of loss, which was that what survives the losing is the truest thing, and the truest thing properly seen is always enough to build from. Nathan Cole was not the cowboy everyone gave up on. He was the man who never gave up on anyone else.